And we are back for episode 19. Welcome. We are building a 2D multiplayer game in Flutter. Right now, in episode 18, we were in the middle of refactoring our code so we could separate code that can run on the server from code that can run on the client as well as on the server. So basically, the client can run all the code, right? Because the client is running with Flutter. However, the server has no notion of Flutter, nor of things like .ui. So anything we were using that references those libraries, we cannot use on the server. So we are basically working right now on factoring out the controller code from our components. For instance, we start with the player. And then anything that controller now still references, we need to basically factor out to not require the .ui. And we can see that we did the geometry. We basically just copied that over, and we can see it actually has no reference to any UI code. It would have been nice if there would have been a .geometry package that people could also maybe use on the server or somewhere, or in the browser. But unfortunately, that's not the case. They kind of bundled that all up with all the other code that is Flutter related. So we have to find another way. What we can do though, we can basically add a geometry conversion class. So basically what we're going to do is create a new file, conversion. And basically what we'll do in here is, so basically what we were trying to do, and unfortunately we named it in a certain way. We said as DUI, right? Everywhere we did this will not work. So basically what we'll do is, for instance, we start from here. So when we draw an image rect, we cannot say as DUI. That won't work. But the thing is, when we render, the question is why does it have to be this kind of offset? It doesn't, right? So if you're not worried about the sprite being so the sprite has a render method, right? So the render method takes an offset. There's no way around that the render method will happen with UI code. So there's no reason why this offset cannot be an offset from .ui. So actually in this case, we'll just remove this entirely and we'll actually get the offset from .ui. And the thing is, if this causes a problem, if the sprite now cannot be used in certain places, then, but the thing is we still want to, so we did a little bit too much here. We still want to use the rect though. So why do we want to still use the rect? Well, because the rect is going to be used in the update, and we'll see that in a second. Right, and so we're already starting to prepare this class a little bit for this. So basically, the rect, right, is also used in rendering, but it should also be, or maybe it's not at all. Yeah, maybe then we can forget about this altogether and make rect. Okay, so fine. So we can argue that the sprite is entirely a UI component. And the controller shouldn't even reference it. It doesn't have an update code. The only thing is that obviously the sprite sheet does mention it, the sprite animation and the sprite sheet. So what we need to do, we need to basically say, we need to learn how to separate out the, also sprite sheet, we shouldn't need this right on the server. I mean, why do we need a sprite sheet? This is clearly for UI stuff. And the sprite animation, we probably also don't need on the server at all. If you have a sprite animation, then that shouldn't be running on the server, and the controller should have no reference to it. So that's one thing. Now let's go to the next one, the thrust sprite. So why are we already getting new errors that we didn't have before? So here, so we're saying we render, and now basically we want so offset 0 here, we can just say that is a, but any render method actually should use the offset from .ui. That would be my argument. Anywhere you render, we are totally fine to use .ui. So let's just remove this from here. And if there's an update method, then we'll basically have to, and yeah, so this is all like really not nicely done. We should import this from here and then import all this from .ui directly instead of importing this huge .material thing where we don't know where anything's coming from. So this is much cleaner. Now, if there was an update method here, or if any controller needs to do this, we need to separate this out. But for now, we'll keep it like this. So here another render, right? But here there's an update in this. So there needs to be a bullet explosion controller, but you can see that it updates the spreadsheet animation. So there's already the point where we need to basically separate this out. So maybe we just need to do that then. So basically when we create a sprite, it will have a, yeah, this is not too much fun actually, to be honest, to have to separate all this out. So the fact is, the only reason why we have to have this is because we need the sprite sheet. So if we move that, we can see that there's a get sprite method from the current index, right? And that's the only place where we need this. It's the only place where the sprite sheet is. Oh, and here we have the sprites count, but we can definitely pass it in. Okay. This is going to be somewhat painful. It's good that we started this now. So let's just look here. What's the problem here? Let's remove this and let's see what happens. Again, this isn't the render. Anywhere where we have a render, that's UI component. Anywhere else, if we need to run this in a controller, it cannot have a render. That's the rule. The walls, right? So they are initting rects. Okay, so yeah, those rects should stay as our rect. But when we render it, because so the render method here, so we're gonna have to have a walls controller and a walls thing. Yeah, and this is where it gets really annoying that we threw all of this together. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this, and we're going to go back to at least a working build. Shouldn't be too many of those anymore. And then we can basically get back to anywhere we have a render, we are expecting it to be a real rect. And we're going to have to go from the very bottom up and pull everything apart. That's the only way that I can imagine it at this point. So there's a render, right? That should be the real offset. We are getting this from material. I do not like that. We should get it from the .ui directly, so we are more clear on what. I'm going to put a show here. What we're getting from there. Colors will come from the material. Hold on. What? Oh no! We don't want that. No, we don't want. Okay, so no, we don't want the canvas colors and paint and stuff like that to come from there. We just want, yeah, we just only want the colors, right? Leave us alone with all your other stuff. We only want the colors. We want that to be clear, right? So, okay. Now here, this would be a normal offset. Where are we here? This is the bullets. Yeah, so basically the way we did this is, I thought it was the right way to do this, but it looks like we ended up doing this backwards because this way it will not work. Should not use this anymore. Okay, so yeah, now we're running into problems here. Handle collision. Okay. Yeah, so basically we cannot get the offset from .ui directly. Here we're going to actually first apply our we'll apply our conversion. So when we create bullet explosion, this offset is basically should be coming. Wait, where's this called from? It's called from update code, right? So that means that it needs to come from our library, right? And now we get one error where it says, well, this one you cannot pass in the bullet explosion sprite because it is a Dart .ui thing. And so now comes our conversions in where we say, basically, we're going to say this is DUI, and then this is our geometry class, geometry module, and then we're going to say that we want to get a DUI offset, and we want to get it from UI offset. We want to get this from the geo offset, right? And it's so short that we make an expression. So we can just say then we create DUI offset from the offset that we are given. All right. So that's as simple as that is. So we should be able now to say UI offset, right? And where we do this is we can discuss. You could argue that when we create bullet explosion, right, that happens as part of this. So yeah, it can't actually, we cannot discuss this actually. It has to happen somewhere else. So here, the bullet explosion sprite actually in this case has to take a geo offset, right? We create this. This has to come in as a geo offset, GUI. As a geo, we call it, as our own offset, and then basically we have to assign it in here. So we'll say that, and unfortunately it can't be final anymore. Unless it allows us to do. So this is definitely a static method, so it should actually allow us to do this. So we can say UI offset from the center that we given, and we'll basically say our center is that. Okay, so let's import that. And so why is it complaining? Okay, so we can't access this. So that's what I was saying. It has to be like this, unfortunately, and then center cannot be final anymore. Okay, so at least we have a working build again. And actually, at this point, the game should work again. So let's try to restart it. But mainly we got it by working by putting .ui back in most places, which is not exactly the goal, but this is just a temporary measure because we realized that we need to actually start from the bottom. Okay, so there's still a problem here. So let's see, cast error. Pour from resize. Size is not a type of size. Okay, so we have still some, so we need to create the same thing we did for offset, and we need to do for size. All right, and then we just rename this to be size. And I think it's going to be width. So the cool thing is that these are really simple data structures. they just have a bunch of functionality on them, so we can easily just recreate them. So now we have to find where we are doing as size, as DOY size. So first of all, here we don't, right? So render bullet. Okay, so we'll get to that later. I already see that there's going to be a lot of these fun things. So let's stop this for now. So basically the thing is that we are rendering here. Okay, so that's fine though, because this is an offset. Okay, so yes. So what we'll have to do is we have to convert this DUI offset from the center, right? We call it UI offset. Okay, that's good. Okay, so now that's happy, because now basically like when we render the bullet, that means we are in rendering mode. The bullets will have to be pulled apart, but we'll do that once we actually get back to working, and then we'll start actually from the bottom up. We'll start from the sprite. The thing is, what I'm wondering is like, why do we even need a Spreadsheet animation? Oh, it's because, yeah, in the controllers we do the updates. Yeah, we do the updates in the control, so the update function needs to be available. Okay, so size not subtype. So there's some sort of cast that we're still doing. I hope we... Oh, here we go. So we need to... this needs to be geo size. So resize is UI thing. Not allowing... I'm not allowing this to be a normal size. That doesn't make sense at all. So so we don't need that cast. So that doesn't make sense at all, because resize is not going to happen on the server. So here we have this dot size, right? So this size actually needs to be part of .ui. So we need to remove our module here for now, and make sure we are actually importing this. Okay, now we get, oh, we don't want Cupertino, that's for sure. We want to get that from .ui, and we want to show. That's also very confusing, because there are a bunch of libraries in Flutter that are basically wrapping, or they are referencing and re-exporting .ui. So sometimes it becomes very unclear where things are coming from. But now for our purposes, we really need to be very specific. Otherwise, we'll never figure this out. I'm almost afraid that we will not get this all done today, but basically we'll have a working game. Okay, we're back to a working game, right? We don't have thrust, that's fine. Okay, so we'll actually like we'll look through the code, and we'll kind of come up with a good commit message here. So we created the conversions, right? And we got ourselves back in a, yeah. So basically what we did here, we removed all the casts. Yeah, so game back to working. Oh, well, actually that's part of the right sub message here. But basically what we'll do, we say is like a fixed typecast. UI related typecast, right? And then we were going to say is we so game back to working, and we'll say that we basically applying conversion where needed, and then using Dart UI in render related code. Okay, so that will give us a working game again. And now we'll start from the very bottom, and we'll have to look through our code very clearly and see like where we can rip things out. And actually I'm going to close all this. Okay, so let me start very scratch. And let's look at this very closely. So we have a sprite. Now we have to decide for everything that we're looking at, we basically have to decide if something is only UI related, and then we'll actually move it into UI folder. And or if something is controller related. So we in our engine, so we'll split some of these files, they'll appear in two folders. So we'll create a new folder here. We say UI, and then we'll say could call it controllers. They are controllers. I was thinking of maybe calling them logic, but especially they are controllers for some of these UI components. Okay, fine. So a sprite. So let's see what's going on here. In the sprite, we initializing with an image. Is there any controller code in here? I don't see any controller code in here. None. Right? It's all about rendering. We're just basically giving it an image here, and then we'll just render that. So that's clearly a render, a UI thing. So let's see if, okay, so it updated all these imports, so cool. So now we got the sprite there. And let's see what kind of changes that applied. Okay, basically it fixed everywhere where we're mentioning a sprite. Fine, perfect. Now the next level up would be the sprite sheet. Now what happens here? We are getting a list of sprites, right? And then basically what we're doing is, actually we're creating that list of sprites. So basically we're getting an image, right? And we're creating a bunch of sprites. And then we basically are able to index into the sprites. There's no update method here. Clearly, clearly a UI concern. Let's just fix this and let's just use the required from here, just to be somewhat consistent. Otherwise, we get really confused very quickly. So this one clearly also belongs in the UI. Okay, and we'll do small check-ins because we want to make sure that this keeps working. So we really see like we changed a bunch of code as a result. And I do restart the game here because if you do large refactorings like that, it actually makes sense to not try to make that do a refresh. So here we have the first thing that has an update method, right? And we'll look at, okay, game's still working, right? We can shoot, everything's working. So our spreadsheets are definitely working. All right, cool. So, so first of all, let's say, so we have, okay, so moving sprite and sprite sheet into UI folder. Okay. All right. So now we have the sprite sheet. Now the thing is, what's UI related here? So it's only that sprite sheet here. Everything else in this animation is controller code. Right? And so if we have a sprite sheet animation, well, we can't mention sprite sheet here. We can't even, so the animation cannot supply us with a sprite sheet directly. So let's just say, where are we getting the sprite? Two places, right? So what we need to do instead is we need to have a controller, or let's just say this is the controller. There's no, we'll pass in the frame count as dependency, and it's going to be required. Right. We'll change this a little bit to where the duration is also a property required, so we don't confuse because they are both well, actually, frame count is an int, but just to be 100% clear, we're going to use our types here, and then we're going to say this dot frames count, and we rename this to frames count without the underscore, because otherwise it doesn't work. But okay, we confused our IDE a lot, so let's see where that's going on. And so that needs to be the Spreadsheet frames count. So actually I'm going to move everything up here, and I'm going to comment it out, the stuff that we actually need to move around. So we got the spreadsheet. We don't want to pass. We can't pass the spreadsheet anymore, unfortunately. This is only the controller part. It's not able to do refactoring. And that would be the frames count. It's the same thing. Okay. So why is it complaining here? Oh, because we didn't name it correctly. Now if we name it without the underscore, that now can be a property. We pass in. Okay. All right. So now we can't get the sprite anymore. The thing is that so the controllers cannot reference UI, but the UI can reference the controllers. So what we can do is we can rename this to Spreadsheet animation controller, and then have a Spreadsheet animation that wraps that. But the thing is, like, I'm still not sure why. Hold on a second here, because I'm still not sure why we even need. Why do we even need this is a sprite. This is clearly, but that update function. Okay, so we're trying to update our animations in our controllers, but that's only for the UI, right? The server will not update the. So let's just say commando back. We'll don't want that. I'm going to argue that this should go into the UI. Because what kind of a spreadsheet animation are we going to have on the server? None. We don't need that. And we shouldn't rely on the animation to update things. They shouldn't ever update our models, right? We shouldn't ever update our models because of some animation. So actually what we need to do instead is make sure wherever we mention the Spreadsheets animation, we need to make sure that that gets separated out. So as we can see here, we got the bullet explosion sprite. And it updates and it renders, and that's it. So the thing is that this update method should not happen on the server. Right? So let's see where we're using that. So what we maybe need to do is we need to have two update methods. Unfortunately, we need to have so basically so this update method, right, that updates models, we need to have some, okay, yeah, there you go. So we need to have two update methods on our controllers. That the wrapping, so basically we'll have an update on the controller, and then we'll have an update on the UI version. So here we have a player controller, right? And we can see, for instance, that it's updating the thrust, right? Well, that we can't do that. That needs to happen as part of the main player. So now we're trying to get somewhere. So that main player, instead of just only rendering, it also needs to have an update method. It's a little bit unclean. And in that case, I would argue that maybe we should just let's actually start doing one thing. Yeah, let's just keep going. I start to see where this is going. So everywhere we have this needs to be in an update method that is part of the player. So we're going to move that here now. And we'll think about that later, though. How we actually going to call this from the game. So, and so basically, in this update method, though, we need to give it the player model. Okay. And you can now see that this starts to work out. So the game now, and this again, this game will also have to be most likely be separated into the only controller parts and into the other parts. But for now, what we'll do, we'll just say that the player, we have the player controller, but the player also needs to update, and then we basically give it the player, the model game. And the thing is, you can see that but at this point we know if there was thrust or not. We give it DT, and now actually we should have our thrust back. So basically we have two parts, right? We have the pure controller parts, which only update the models, which are called controllers, and they can run on the server. And then we have the visual parts, but the visual parts sometimes have animations which need to be updated. So now we get our thrust back, right? Which need to be updated. But the things on the server, they won't need to be updated because on the server there will be no such thing, right? So maybe what we can do is we can name this clearer. Update animations or update sprites or whatever, right? Let's name it update sprites for now. Okay, so now we can start pulling this apart. So that means then that the player controller now has no mention of any sprite sheet anymore. So now it's a pure controller, which means we should theoretically be able to run this with like we're trying to do the whole time. So let's see. Let's see, why are we still getting this? Hit toss. Oh, okay. So yes, because when we try this now, we have to, yeah, this is painful, but we have to do this. And we'll have to find a better way to do this, but let's try this again. Okay, now it worked. So now it worked. We can now run our player controller without any problems. So just like only if we change that code there. But maybe like on the server, what we can actually do when we start the server, we'll just have some script that replaces this file. It's not ideal, but we'll see. So now actually player thrust updated in UI and player UI part. Okay, so and so at this point we can actually run our player controller by itself. So that was the whole goal. Okay, so and the thing is, like, the only things that we need to really pull apart are the ones that are actually affecting models, right? So we have the bullet model. The bullet model is part of bullets, which now needs to be separated out into separate things. So we got an update and we got a render part, right? So let me make this really big. And so what we'll do is inside controllers, we create a new file, bullets controller. And now let's see how coupled we are here. Because I think what's going on here, we might be relying on our sprite sheet to know if. So one thing is, yes. So the main important thing is that this handle collision code, that needs to be all part of only the animation. So we will, well, not exactly, but we'll set the bullet collided and all this stuff, but the consequence of it colliding needs to be part of the animation, and not the controller, right? So bullets controller. All right, and so we'll copy some things that we think we need. The radius we don't need. Right, it's not part of figuring out if we exploded. So this one, obviously, bullet explosion sprite cannot be in our controller. MS to explode. Why do we? That's part of the animation, yes. TASA is probably also part of rendering. So it seems like the only. So let me copy this. The only two things we need are those. So we only need this. Don't need the exploding bullets. And let me just pull this in. We have to be really careful with these types, right? These types have to be pure Dart types only. So we're going to have, if you have types related to UI, we're going to have to create another file for that. So let's see, why is this complaining still? Oh, needs to be bullets controller. Okay, so oh yeah, we need to collide it. Okay, so yeah, so all right. So now should be happy. We make sure we import that from our types. Okay, and so now we're going to go add one. Okay, that's clearly controller code. We add bullets, and now the update method. And now we'll see how far we get with this without running into render things. Physics.move. Right, we have to make sure that physics doesn't. Yeah, it's not using anything that we are not supposed to use. So now the exploding bullets.add, right? And that needs to be actually part of this update method. So let's actually remove this one. And so void update, right? And it takes the bullets. This one basically takes a list of bullets, right? The one that we basically maintain in the controller, and then also takes double DT. And now basically what we do here is if bullet collided, so we go through the bullets like we do here, and then if bullets collided, okay, so this code still needs to stay here. So except that it's now separate, right? So basically here, when the bullet collided, we don't add it to this. We just add it to we add it here. And then here we don't need that anymore. We need the handle collision. That is clearly controller code. Because that basically all it does, it updates the bullet to basically let it know that it collided, right? And so here we need to be careful. We need to import our thing, our offset, because we are in the controller. And so this code needs to be part of the it needs to be here. Yes, it needs to be part of so we can start seeing that we're starting to separate things that are related to rendering UI, animations, all these things. They're starting to all stay over here, and things that have nothing to do with UI at all end up here. So the server will never show an animation, right? And so it's also good that animations shouldn't influence models at all. So if a bullet exploded, it needs to just, for the server, it exploded and we're done. However, if, for instance, you're saying, well, we need to know when the animation is over, right? We need to maybe do something afterwards. Maybe we need to put a hole where the bullet was. Well, in that case, what we need to do is to actually either have a kind of like a countdown on the model itself as well to know when that's done, or basically drive from the animation from that as well. Basically, they have the model update and the animation obeys the model instead. So that's an option there. So the cool thing is now, I think, so the main thing that we need to make sure that everywhere we update a model, that needs to happen in the controller. We can never ever update a model inside the this main thing. So what I'm wondering is, like, why do we have this? We don't need this anymore, right? All right. I'm asked to explode, and these are all render related. Now we can't have the list of bullets passed in. We need to basically so this is controller code. And we basically need to have the bullets passed into the update sprites method, right? So the inside this code that is UI only code, the bullets are always going to be read only. Like any model is going to be read only. We can never, ever, and so we can even make this an iterable to kind of emphasize that. Bullet model, right? So so we can never ever modify the model here. And why is that a problem? Well, because then on the server that won't happen. On the server we only run the controllers. So then the server will not run the same simulation that we run on the client, and that's definitely not good. So basically what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to have the server run the simulation. The client may keep running the simulation as well, but the server is going to be the master and basically dictate to the client what is the truth. So the client may say, okay, well, I'm going to piece by piece, like, move this along, like the bullets, maybe I'm going to keep moving them. But if then the server says, well, no, actually they are now here, the client will have to obey. Otherwise, this probably for this game is not an issue, but I'm trying to show this how you would do this for a real game. Hackers could basically say, well, I'm going to just say that my bullet is now here and killed my opponent, and so that would not be nice. So let's say we need a bullets controller. And we need to initialize it. Let me just do this, and then we'll figure out what each one needs. So we don't need this. So now we kind of easily see what we need to pass in. So we don't need game bullets. Okay, now I think we're happy, pretty much. The only difference here now is that when we render, we want to pass in the, so now we actually need, in the render method here, well, we have the game model inside the, right, so we need to game dot, I think, bullets, right, to render that. Now, in the update, we need to also say bullets dot update sprites, and so it wants the bullets and dt, and then now it's happy, right? And now you can see, like, obviously, this needs to be the controller, right? So obviously, like, this method, this method will not be like this on the server. We're going to have to also pull this apart. Most likely, we'll have to pull the whole game thing apart to have a game controller and the rest, because like this cannot be part of the main thing. Of the server part, right? So we're missing the tile size here. So okay, so we actually need the tile size. That's not a problem because that's not a UI thing. And why do we need the tile size? Because we need to figure out where to correct the bullet to, right? Remember, I think that was yesterday that we figured out our bullets were kind of exploding in the middle of the wall, especially since our machine was slow at the moment. And so that we don't want that. So we still need to calculate that here. So here we should have a missing tile size thing. The cool thing is that we can keep turning the this warning thing on and just turn it off whenever we're trying to run things on the server. So that works. But I wish, you know, the Dart team would have added these kind of annotations directly to Dart and not to Flutter, so we could use them. Anyway, so at this point we pulled the bullets apart. Oh, okay, well I'm not trying to run this. I'm actually trying to run the I'm trying to run the Flutter app, and obviously this fails now again because we have the we basically right, we undid our changes here to get the warnings, right? So here we undid that, and so that's why it doesn't work now, but it will work once we change that back. Okay, so we're pretty good. So we changed the bullets, and we're just going to have to go through one by one and look at things. Okay, cool. Bullets still work, perfect, right? So for instance, if we weren't calling the update sprites, the bullets wouldn't render. They would still, like, the models would still update, but the bullets wouldn't render in the right, or like at least the explosions wouldn't happen. They wouldn't animate. So we're fine with that. I'm going to call this all UI because we're trying to separate out UI. Separating bullets. Let's just call it that. It's clear enough. I want to get to one more. We have about 8 minutes left. Colliders. Controller, right? Clearly controller code. Except, I need to get rid of this. And I don't even know. Okay, here we have the required thing, and we need to pull in our own little library. We could obviously just get rid of those. They're not necessary for the code, but I like to get those the warnings. Now yes, so this grid is clearly only UI. So we'll move that to UI. Sorry, it stays here. So actually, since we did this for the engine, we're gonna have the same thing here. I'm gonna move those here, and we're going to move the colliders. We said what? That is also clearly. Hold on, no, that is controller code. But it's not exactly controller. It's not a controller. It's just a helper. So we'll leave that here. But things that are clearly like UI, like the grid, we move here. And then we have the player, which is also clearly UI at this point, right? So we have the controllers, and then we have the UI parts. So in actually what we could call them widget or visual, but we know that because everything else is called like player model, player controller. So this is like the UI. We can rename it later if you wanted to, but we'll leave it for now. So the colliders we leave. So first of all, let's check this in. UIs sorting UI related into separate folder. And so the colliders we said they're kind of for everything. Background, I would say it's clearly UI. There's no update here at all. And the thing is that we have always to think about, will the server ever need it? No, he does never need a grid. He never needs a bold sprite, and nor does he need the background. So we move that around. And actually I'm going to, since this was such a small change, I'm just going to amend that to the previous commit. And the walls. So now the walls actually they need, well, that's a good question though. The walls are just there for rendering. They're not used anywhere else. They're only, as far as I know, they're only used in the game. They're created here. And no one references them. So they're clearly UI, right? And basically, if you want to know if we collided, we are not using those walls. We are actually using the walls from the model, right? So this top position walls here, that actually comes from that comes from the game walls. That's part of the model. So we don't need these walls. Again, I'm going to amend this commit. And so the cool thing is that at this point we are pretty much in a good place because well, the only other thing is obviously we need to figure out here if we have anything that is still, we have a controllers here and we never even put anything in there because there are no controllers, so to speak, in the game. So I think maybe in the engine we keep everything outside the UI that's not UI. So this is clearly a widget. So this goes into UI, right? This can never be used by the server. The game itself, so we need to remove this one. So the game renders. The game we need to separate out. We do that tomorrow. The hit tiles are definitely not at all like UI. The images are UI, clearly, right? So we can move those into UI. Physics. Physics are not UI at all. And they are not referencing anything here. So let me just see what I'm show here to be clear what I'm getting from math. All right, tile position. Tile position also has no relation to UI at all. And then the world position doesn't have it either. So okay, now we got the engine also separated. So we got a few things that are UI related. We got some geometry, but that's mainly to get the classes that should have been separate, but unfortunately they are buried inside .ui, which is then pulling in Flutter. We can remove that folder for now. There's nothing in there. And then basically we have to, tomorrow we have to work on how can we separate this game out into a controller and so into a render thing. Most likely actually we won't do that. So the game will stay like this, but the game that we actually will have here, this one, where is it? We'll split that up. This is a 2-for game. we will split that up into the controlling code only. So we have a game controller, and then we have a game UI part, and then the game itself will just forward calls to that, and then the server will only go in here and use the game controller. It will not ever go to the main game, right? And so that's how we'll do this. And as I said, we are running out of time, so I will check this in. So the last commit said UI sorting UI into separate folder. I'm actually gonna I'm going to change this sorting game UI. But let's just say game here, and the other one is going to be the server. Sorry, the engine code. So we're going to have the same message, except we're going to say engine sorting UI related into separate folder. Okay, so we're good there. Actually, we may have to force push because we amended the commit message. We'll create a tag, and then we'll call it. So we have a tag for every episode, right? And so we'll have to say git tag episode 19 and